coming up on this episode. See, you're either giving out free advice there, Will, or you're sabotaging everybody.
Oh, no. I don't think I can even sabotage with that. That's too nailed on. Both teams can't score.
So carry on listening to find out if it was good advice or sabotage. Hello, this is the DraftCast. I'm your host, Luke, and I am joined today by our two-time champion, Will Morris, the manager of Gareth Northgate. How are you doing, Will?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, looking forward to today's segment. And thanks for having me back on.
Good. You've been excited to come back?
I have. It's felt like a long time. And to be honest, you timed it perfectly well, especially after the cup results this week, which went really well for me. So I'm delighted to be on this week, especially after the good win.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that in a bit. So yeah, we'll go through the league table as it stands. We'll talk about the cup, the quarterfinal results. We'll do a bit of a review of your teams from the week just gone and upcoming game week 28. Then we'll do something a bit different instead of the predictions this week, and then we'll jump onto your segment, I think.
Yep, sounds perfect to me.
So yeah, let's get into it. So the league table, as it stands, I got the highest score this week, which I was quite happy with. It's been a while, so I'm glad to get some form again.
Yeah, you were a bit of a dark horse because I thought you were falling away because you had your sort of spell at the top and things started to go a little bit pear-shaped. I think that is due to your loyalty to your team, obviously, to Southampton.
Yeah.
But ultimately against Man City, you had a pretty good result against them, to be honest, with sort of James Ward-Prowse back in. Have you got Shea Adams as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, Shea Adams.
So I had both of their goals.
Yeah, so you've got to take that. So I was a little bit annoyed that you ended up top scoring the week because I thought I'd had an absolute unbelievable week on 62. I was a little bit disappointed I didn't add to that, but I suppose I've got to look at the project big picture here and to close the gap on Team Rowe by 17 points. He's only 22 points ahead now.
Yeah.
So if I was him, I'd be getting a little bit twitchy about things. Especially when he's meant to have this double game week with supposedly 10 City players playing, which didn't happen. He got bailed out at the end by KDB, but if I just have a quick look at his team now, so he got 5, 7, 23, 25 points off essentially 10 players, which are all Man City. I'm taking that all day. So, yeah, I think he's missed his chance there because he could have really driven it home there. So I'm feeling confident narrowing the gap. Obviously, great week for me personally as well. So, yeah, I was happy with how things went.
Yeah, agreed. We got James with the lowest score this week of 33. Not a great score on what is essentially a double game week again.
No, that's not, is it?
And it's knocked him out the cup.
Yeah, I mean, I look at his back line. It's terrible, isn't it? I mean, he's got Nat Phillips from Liverpool. Liverpool are terrible, and also he's even worse. So to have him playing is really not the best. In his midfield, he's got 4 now. So West Ham are doing really well, but he's just one of those players who he's not a great fantasy player, doesn't really give you much. And obviously he's got Mane, which he was delighted about. But to be honest, I think he might have come off in the long run better on that trade towards the end of the season.
I hope so.
Mane's dropped off. I know Maddison's injured at the moment, but in the one game you had him, or 1 or 2 games you had him, he scored against Villa. So, yeah, I don't think that's a bad trade at all to make. So, fair play for doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised when he offered me 1-for-1. And I looked at him and I was like, why would I not take this?
That's what I mean. I think people get seduced by the name and sort of the previous reputation. Because last year, Mane was unbelievable.
Yeah.
He's been really good for the last few years, but he's not been great this year. Like, you look at his form. And I don't even think he's in the top 10 players this year, which is pretty staggering considering he's usually been up there, relentlessly. So if I look at it, Ward-Prowse is ahead of him, Souček, Neto, Harvey Barnes, who's injured, Mars doesn't play, is ahead of him. Grealish hasn't played for about 4 game weeks, is still ahead of him. So I think you've seduced him nicely there by giving him a big name, but also you've got a returner player who's actually doing pretty well. So fair play.
Yeah. So let's run through the quarterfinals then. So we'll catch everybody up on the results. So quarterfinal 1 was myself against George, Ajax Trees down.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see, I scored 66. George was on 44. So unfortunately, George didn't win that quarterfinal.
No, he put up a valiant fight though. I think 44 in any game week is something that you shouldn't be too disappointed with. Just happened. It just happened that you had a dominant week, and if you're the top point scorer in this league, there's nothing that you could have done about it this week. So you shouldn't be too disheartened.
No, I think going into that final game though, I think it was like 45-44. So if it had been a normal week, it would have been a really close quarterfinal, to be fair. So yeah. Fair play to George for that one. Quarterfinal 2 was Jack versus James. So Roque Santanudes and Emil Pesky. And obviously, we've already mentioned James got knocked out because he got the lowest score, and Jack was 42. But he got lucky there.
Very lucky.
Because if he was against anyone else, he'd have been out.
Very lucky. It was a pretty disappointing quarterfinal. It's like if you go into the FA Cup, you always get one quarterfinal where you look at it, and it's usually something like Burnley versus Cardiff, where nobody really cares about them. There's always one team that has to make it through to the semi-final, but it's a poor game. This was a poor game week for both of them, and one of them scraped through, but I wouldn't be too optimistic about their chances in the semi-finals, Jack. So I think he's done as far as he's probably gone as far as he can do, so fair play to him, but he needs to certainly reevaluate his ideas if he wants to make it to the final.
I'll let him respond to that claim. Quarterfinal 3. I think this is probably the most exciting one. So we've got Bruno Fernandes, so Rich versus Tom and Team Row 3.0. And yeah, surprise knockout. Rich knocked it out of the bag.
Massive cup set, wasn't it? Exactly what the cup's all about. You've got Bruno, who at the time I think he was still 9th in the league, which isn't where I'm sure he wanted to be at the start of the season. You've got Team Row 3, who were seemingly in control of the league. And it's sort of the equivalent, I guess, of Man City getting knocked out of the FA Cup by Fulham. You wouldn't expect it to happen, but fair play to Fernandes. He's masterminded that well, and he's absolutely sent Team Row back to the cleaners. And it all depends to see how that will affect Team Row in the long term. Whether that will, affect his league chances now, whether that's get over that recovery, we'll have to just wait and see.
Yeah, I think like I said, great cup set. Something we all wanted to happen, but none of us expected to happen. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll take that. Quarterfinal number 4. So this is yourself and Tolly with Wacky Whipnuts, who was on last week, and we both thought he might be able to pip you, but, your form has just been ridiculous so far. So, fair play. Well done.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if it was the previous week, I'd have struggled, but I think possibly I got into his head a little bit with the trash talk. He put up a really good fight, though. I'll give it to him, because I was getting a little bit twitchy when Mahrez scored one. Then he scored another one. I was thinking, oh, this isn't great. Then he got an assist.
Yeah.
And then luckily for me, Pep decided just to spare my stress and took him off after just on 60 minutes. That was nice. And he didn't bring Cancelo on, who's done all right. And unfortunately, Tolly's prediction of bringing a defensive midfielder, Rodri, for 6 points, unfortunately, it didn't work out for him. It was a shame because he left Iheanacho and Martial on the bench, which was 14 points. It still wouldn't have been enough, mind, but it would have been nice to have run it close right to the end. But
yeah,
no, fair play to Tolly. He put up a good fight, and he did the best he could do. But there's always motivation for next year, Tolly. I'm sure you'll do better next year.
Yeah, I think these cups have been a great addition to the league. So I'm sure next year everyone will be fighting over to win them.
They will. And just a bit of a shame, just a quick mention as well, that from the council as well, that unfortunately there's only one of us left, and it's myself. This trophy was partly recreated due to the poor showing previously from council members. So we felt we should introduce the FA Cup style later on the season, and unfortunately the other 2 council members have been knocked out again. So just down to Northgate to fly the flag for the council. So fingers crossed for myself, obviously. But there's going to be some stiff competition coming up. I think Fernandes has definitely won a dark horse to watch.
Yep.
You look at his team and there's nothing which strikes you as alarming. However, as we've seen, Dawson is an unbelievable goal machine at the moment, scoring goals, keeping clean sheets. A pretty smart pick-up in Maitland-Niles as well, getting a clean sheet for West Brom. It's not an obvious pick, that, but it shows signs of a smart manager to bring in someone from a lesser team and also pick up points. So I think he's a dark horse to be wary of.
Yeah. One thing, what you've just said there, though, about the Draft Council, what I take from that, Will, is you've tried to rig a cup and it hasn't worked.
I think I wouldn't say trying to rig. I'd try to say make it more competitive. Because the cup went down so well the first time round, I thought it'd be a great addition to get the second cup in.
Yeah, no, definitely.
With the view that hopefully some of the council might progress further in the quarterfinals. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case this time. Because the first one was like, you've got like 2 cups, you've got the League Cup and you've got the FA Cup. So we thought we'd try and bring in 2. And yeah, both of them have been a resounding success. So definitely good additions because it makes the standard game weeks more interesting, and it also breaks up the season a little bit rather than just a long battle for the top spot. It means there's something else to fight for as well.
No, definitely agreed. They've been, like I said, all great additions.
Yeah.
So we'll leave that there, and we'll have a look at your team. So, like we've already mentioned, great score of 62 this week.
Yeah.
Kane doing you well, Fernandez doing you well.
Yeah.
But my question for you, Will, on your team is...
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got multiple questions, but my first question is, what are your thoughts on Timo Werner?
I like him. I think he's actually a decent player. I think there's more to work on, obviously, in terms of his finishing at the moment, but he's getting the chances, which is the main thing. I think the worry would be if he was someone like Joel Linton at Newcastle, who doesn't score but doesn't get any chances either.
Yeah.
Werner could have had a couple last week against Everton, but to be fair, Pickford actually did play really well, so I'm going to give Pickford a little bit of credit in terms of the saves he made. But I mean, really, Werner's probably about, in the reality, he's probably about a 6th, 7th round pick at the moment in terms of his performances and due to the lack of strikers available.
Yeah.
And I drafted him. He's my first overall pick, actually. But the thing is, the benefit for me is that the new Chelsea manager, Tuchel, seems to actually like him. So he seems to be playing each week. So at least I'm expecting minimum to get at least 2 points each week off him.
Yeah.
He looked like he was turning the corner sort of a couple of game weeks ago. He scored against Sheffield United. Although he got 2 assists, I think, against Sheffield United. Scored against Newcastle at home. But since then, he's had a few tough games. Man United at home, Liverpool away, Everton at home. And I'm hoping that Chelsea's run eases up a little bit. I still have faith in him, but he's going to get me a couple of goals before the end of the season. But he's not performed as well as I'd have liked, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So, I think it's fair to say you're probably the man to beat still at the moment. You're probably the one to beat in the cup as well.
Yeah.
But what would you say is your biggest weakness in your team at the moment?
I would say probably from what was probably my strongest area, which was my midfield, because I had Harvey Barnes, who was just unbelievable. Like, he was getting me so many points. Like, before he got injured, just to give you some context, so he was on a run of 7 points, 8 points, 2 points, 9 points, 6, 6, 8, 3, 3, 12, 13, and then unfortunately got injured, which was, I mean, that was sort of like MVP level.
Yeah.
And then I've got, so my midfield this week is Fernandez, Souček and Traore. Now, Souček I've got because I really like him. I just like him as a player, and I like him he seems quite a nice bloke as well. And to be fair, when I first brought him in, he was getting goals, but they seem to have dried up at the minute. So I'm a little bit concerned about his performances, and he's got Man United away this week. It's never good to have your 2 midfielders playing against each other. I've got Bertrand Traore, who's a bit of an enigma. He'll either get you points or he won't. That's the probably the easiest way I can sort of dilute that down. He'll either be absolutely fantastic and get you a goal and an assist in the game, or he'll just be absolutely terrible and get took off on just about 60 minutes.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit concerned about his performance. And I've got Lookman as well, who again is just a random player. He seems like he's got all the talent in the world, and he's 100% guaranteed to start for Fulham. He'll skin about 3 or 4 players and get one-on-one, but then just fluff it last minute. So I'm a little bit concerned about my midfield's performance at the moment. And obviously, but the only shining light out of that is I do have Bruno Fernandes, who is the league's MVP and is quite comfortably the MVP. So I do feel fortunate to have him. I think if I didn't have him in my midfield...
It's a bold word to use there. I think a lot of people probably wouldn't use the word fortunate, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm fortunate to have him, and I think that was done via some good trading, which at the time was a decent trade. I think it was only if Callum Wilson didn't get injured, I think the trade would have actually benefited Rich, and if other managers wouldn't have, I guess, vultured on Rich to steal him off him, Rich might have actually come out of that with a better trade, but it is what it is. But yeah, I suppose in the long run, I've been He's done all right for me, so that's good.
Yeah.
But I was a little bit concerned about the other midfielders in my team at the moment.
Okay. So we're recording this before the waivers this evening, but this will go out after the waivers. So do you have any waivers lined up?
Let me just have a quick check. I don't think I do. No waivers at all. I've tried to resist making plenty of waivers. I think I quoted at the start of the season that you'd make your trades early and try to get your team sorted. With the additional members in the league, it's always going to be difficult to pick up good players later on. And I think that's a struggle that I found at the moment. So I've hit the Bednarek button, which sort of paid off and sort of didn't against his double game week when he got 6 points for a cleanie, but then also didn't do particularly well against Man City, letting in 5. So it was a really weird one with Southampton. But I've decided to keep faith with him.
I mean, I wouldn't have expected them to have kept a clean sheet against City, but
No,
I'm quite proud of their performance. I think they played really well to start with, and they did.
Yeah, you were brilliant.
So,
I thought you guys were great and good for sticking up for your team as well. I did bring him in just with the view of purely playing the Sheffield United game and hoping for the clean sheet there. But I was also hoping for maybe a sneaky 2 points or even a 1-pointer against Man City, just because all points are adding up now. So
yeah,
so that was a bit of a shame. But like I say, going forward, you were excellent. It was just a shame that some of the goals let in were probably avoidable.
Definitely, yeah.
But yeah, I've decided to retain him because they're playing Brighton. Brighton at home, and Brighton is just one of those teams which just aren't doing particularly great. So
yeah,
thought I'd retain him and just see how he gets on with the hope of obviously a clean sheet. So he's almost like a bonus player this week for me. So fingers crossed for myself there.
Okay. My final question then is, how do you plan to manage the Barnes injury?
It's a difficult one because if I thought when he got injured, I thought, well, that's him out for the season. So I was just going to trade him out. I wasn't going to show any loyalty to him. Even if he was coming back for like one game or something like that, I would have still traded him out. You've got to look at the bigger picture. But he sort of teased me by the fact that he's expected to return to the 10th of April. So I'm hoping that I can get probably 4 or 5 game weeks out of him. It's just whether that happens, because fortunately we've got the international break coming up, so that's another week which buys some time for me. But I'm going to have to try and manage my other areas. Like I say, my midfield was an area of strength. Now I'd probably consider it my weakest area.
Yeah.
My strikers, Kane and Werner, I'm pretty happy with. Obviously, Kane I'm delighted with, but Werner I know is probably going to get me at least 2 points a week. And unfortunately, Carlos Vinicius just doesn't play. He was brought in for collateral if Kane got injured, but even now, to be fair, it looks like they wouldn't play him. So I think the way I'm going to have to manage it is with my defensive line. Hence, I'm playing 5 this week with the view to knowing that I'm not going to get the points from midfield, so I'm going to try load up and bank on clean sheets happening. Now, whether they do is another question. I'm looking at Villa away at Newcastle. For me, that should be a clean sheet, because Newcastle have got no attacking players and Villa have got one of the best defences in the league. So I'd like to think those two marry up.
Yep.
I've got, as I mentioned, Bednarek at home against Brighton. I'd like to think that's a clean sheet, or at least close to one. I've got Johnny Evans, who, this is a little bit nervous me, 75% chance of playing. If he plays against Sheffield United at home again, I would say that's a clean sheet. Laporte is a funny one because he doesn't really play, and I don't think he's going to play this weekend because he gave away a penalty. He was pretty poor against Southampton, so I'd be surprised if he plays again. But I've got him anyway just out of hope. And Tarkowski, no, I don't really know with Burnley at the moment. They either keep a clean sheet or they're terrible. So but they kept a clean sheet against West Brom. He got 3 bonus points. I was delighted. And understandably against West Brom, but then the following game they lost 4-0. So it's like, it's trying to plan. That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so relying on defence, and obviously my goalkeeper Martinez, who, if I just have a quick look at his stats, he's the 5th best player in the league.
Yeah.
Which is insane for a goalkeeper. I know I touched on that on my last podcast, saying how important goalkeepers were, but I think he's probably accelerated that now. He's ahead of Raheem Sterling, Jamie Vardy, Rashford, Gundogan, Bamford, Grealish, De Bruyne, and for a guy who was undrafted, it's a hell of a pick. I'm delighted with him. So
that's mad. That is.
Yeah, there's always one or two that slip through the net every year. And I think this year he was one of them. So yeah, very lucky to have him.
Okay, right. So next up, I think we'll do something a bit different this time, and pass on the predictions. But we've already sort of discussed some of the fixtures coming up. But I want to ask you, what fixture are you looking forward to the most that isn't your team of Aston Villa?
Yeah. Okay, so let me just have a quick look and just see. I think if I was going to be obvious, I would probably say the Arsenal-Spurs game because it's a derby.
Yeah.
However, what I've learned this year is that all the big games are absolutely rubbish. They just don't. They don't give you any goals. There's usually nothing that happens because both teams are scared of losing. So I'm going to park that one and not go with that one for the obvious one. I'm going to go for a bit of a left field one and go for Man United West Ham. I think the way that West Ham have played this year has been brilliant. I think the two lads they've got midfield, Rice and Souček, are just unreal. And they've signed a right back called Kufal, who's just... I can't work him out. I don't think he's a player who's got that great quality, but he's one of those players you just hate to play against because he's got a massive heart and will just run all day and just won't leave you alone.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see how he gets on against the likes of Rashford. And I think there'll be goals in the game. So I'm looking forward to seeing how obviously Fernandes plays just from a selfish point of view, but I think it's not going to be easy for Man United at all. And I would put an outside bet on West Ham nicking that one. I think United will be on a high after beating Man City, but sometimes in sport it's quite high to reach the same level as you did the week beforehand. We see it all the time in sort of in football where I was just going to use Villa as my team and have a great result against a big team we wouldn't expect it to beat. So someone like Arsenal away 3-0, we might then go the following week and lose 3-2 to Burnley or something like that. Something you wouldn't expect. So I'm thinking Man United might be caught short here a little bit. Especially people like Martial, who played really well. I don't think they'll be able to reach those levels again. And West Ham are just a tiring team to play against because they're all massive, but they're all fit. They don't seem to get tired either.
Yeah.
So, like, I wouldn't want to. If I was a defender in the Premier League, Antonio's probably one of the least favourite players I'd like to play against because he's strong. He'd batter me. He's faster than me. He's not technically great, but I would be absolutely energy zapped by about the 70th minute.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that game. That's the game I'm looking forward to watching. I think most on Sunday on Sky Sports at 7:15.
Be interesting to get George and Rich's views on that game.
Yeah, exactly. We've also got some conflict in the group as well.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we see a bit of cattiness between Rich, the Bear, and George. I think they're all too modest and too nice.
Lawrence as well, yeah.
And they're all too nicer guys to give anything out. But I would certainly encourage them to at least dig each other out if there's something bad that happens. But I think they're all too nice and will be very polite about the game. But yeah, I'm going to mix it up and go for a West Ham 2-1 win.
Ooh, you put a score on there as well.
Yeah, I've gone for it. I've gone big.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think that could be the most interesting game this week.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of the other ones. Southampton-Brighton is probably 0-0. Sorry, Luke.
No, I'm confident. I'm confident we're going to win it. I think after our game with City, I think although we lost, I think the guys will probably be upbeat about it. You know, got 2 goals,
Yeah.
one from open play as well, which I think is big.
Yeah, no, that's massive against City. Yeah, right. Right. The drabbest game, how Sky Sports have put this as 3:00 is Crystal Palace West Brom. That is, I would encourage everyone to draft in defenders from both teams. So there's going to be no goals in that game. And I know I've said it, it's probably going to be a 3-3 draw.
Yeah.
But I'm putting my neck on the line and guarantee clean sheets for those who've got people from those 2 clubs. You can mark it off on your points list. 6 points clean sheets, no problem.
See, you're either giving out free advice there, Will, or you're sabotaging everybody.
Oh, no. I don't think I can even sabotage with that. That's 2 nailed on. Both teams can't score. So it's got to be 0-0.
Yeah, well, we'll find out, won't we, on Saturday?
Yeah, we will.
Okay, I quite enjoyed that. We'll maybe do that with someone else another time.
Yeah, it's good.
But for now, we will move on to your segment.
Cool. So what I've gone for this week is a overview of referees since the Premier League was founded in 1992.
Okay.
And what I've done is progressively looked at the amount of cards that are given out by the top 6 refs in those leagues. So we'll look at So I've basically picked the referees that have got the most appearances for that season. So 92, 93. I then jumped a number of years to 2000, 2010, 2015, and the current modern day, so this season.
And just to compare the refereeing performances that have gone on since the start of the Premier League to now, because there's been a lot of chat in the public, not just in our group, but of refereeing standards and how poor they are, how frustrating they can be. So I've wanted to give an overview of what refereeing was like back in the day and to what it is now. So we'll leave this up to the listeners to decide whether they feel that the game has gone soft or whether it's got harder or if the refereeing standards have improved over time. So, and just to add some context to this as well. So in terms of cards, this is actually quite an important part of the Fantasy Draft League. So I would encourage managers to actually try to do some research into who's refereeing their games going forward. Because ultimately, if you get a yellow card, it's -1 point. If you get a red card, it's -3 points. So we do a lot of research into what team we're going to be playing. Like, say if you're playing Sheffield United, you might load upon defenders and your attackers of that certain team because they're likely to win. And that way you're banking on either goals scored, assists scored, or clean sheets kept. But it's also worth doing some research into the referee because if you're going to be looking at it, they can potentially cost you some serious points. So just moving on to my first slide. This is going back to the first season in the Premier League. So you'll see that the blue column represents matches played or matches refereed.
Yeah.
The yellow column obviously is yellow cards given throughout the season, and red cards, the amounts that have been dished out. So there are some names on here which a lot of us won't recognise because this is sort of just around the time we were being born, but some of them you might recognise just through, you might recognise their name in the media. So Keith Hackett is one. I think he's like a chair of referees, or he's got a relatively important job with the Refereeing Association, I think. But if we look at also the amount of games they are refereeing, so on here you're probably looking about, on average, probably about 18 games a season that are being refereed.
Yeah.
And if we were looking at it in modern day, Philip Don is the referee that you do not want to be refereeing your team, because you can see that he has absolutely smashed the yellow cards through the roof. 41 yellow cards and three red cards, compared to someone like Joe Worrell, who only refereed one less game and gave out 12 yellow cards and 0 red cards. So what this will also highlight as well is the one thing which has been a frustration of mine, a frustration I think of many fans, managers, supporters, players across the country over the last 20, 30 years, is the lack of consistency in refereeing. So what I'd like to just harp back on is, I'm not being funny, but if I looked at Philip's games and Joe Worrell's games, Philip Don's game and Joe Worrell's games, I bet you there are yellow cards which they would disagree over. Because there's no way Philip is giving 41 cards and Joe giving 12 yellow cards in total and no reds. So for me, if you had Philip coming up and refereeing your game, you'd be thinking, right, it's no 50-50s, lads, because you're going to get booked here.
Yeah.
And also, that can affect not just that current game week's performance, but also future game week's performance. Because if you pick up, I think it's 5 yellow cards before a certain date, possibly January, it's a 1-game ban. I think if you get 10 yellow cards, it's a 2-game ban. And also if you get a red card, depending on the severity, it can be a 3-game ban. Or if you do something like an Eric Cantona where you jump into the crowd and Kung Fu kick someone, you can be looking out for the rest of the season. So I just want you to bear in mind some of these stats here, because we're going to be looking through just future years going forward and just trying to work out when refereeing went soft. So 1992-93, the next season we look at is the year 2000, 2001.
Holy moly.
So in between these 8 years, you can see that the amount of matches that referees were managing, or refereeing, has increased slightly. So you're probably looking at an average of about 22, 23 games here. But what you can start to see is immediately the yellow cards jump out to you. So you're looking at people like Graham Poll, Jeff Winter, absolutely yellow card happy, and also be an absolute nightmare. One thing which I'd like to flag here as well is Andy D'Urso. 21 games, 7 yellow cards. So he's averaging a red card every 3 games, which is an absolute scandal. What we have to remember going back to these days, though, these are the years where personally I probably really sort of fell in love with football. I knew bits about it beforehand, but this is when I was starting to get to the age of about 8, 9 years old, where I started to really understand the rules, understand what it meant to go into football. And this was also the years where people like Roy Keane and Patrick Vieira were out there in their prime. This is where they would smash people for fun. So you look at Graham Poll, for example. I remember he was in charge of a few Man United Arsenal games, 10 red cards in 23 games. So that's just over a red card every 2 games.
That's just mad, isn't it?
which is insane, which is carnage. And you're thinking there, just if you're going to relate that back to a fantasy point of view, just from the red cards, he's minus 30 points, and also from yellow 70. So just from having Graham Poll, roughly 23 games, he's cost those players 100 points in terms of scores. So that's what I'm saying. It's important to actually look at the referee who's refereeing that game, because they can be just as crucial to the outcome of your position at the end of the season as it would be for, let's say, playing lesser teams. So we jumped 8 years with this one in the previous one. What we're going to look at now is the 2010-2011 season. So I can't remember if this was when I was season ticket holder. I know me and Adam went a lot around this time, but here again we can see, granted the matches have increased here, so this is where workloads of refs started to increase more, and we're starting to see some of the more household names that we deal with here. So people like Mike Dean, who I know riles a lot of fans and a lot of people around the country. Got people like Howard Webb, who was seen as probably the most successful English referee, went on to referee a World Cup final, where now English referees they're not even consideration to really manage anything in the Euros or anything like that. So again, it takes us up to, just in terms of yellow cards, we've breached the 100 mark now. So someone like Phil Dowd handing out 108 yellow cards and 9 red cards in 30 appearances, which is a lot. Special shout out as well to the manager last on this list, who took charge of the least amount of games in Martin Atkinson. 26 matches, 11 red cards. So again, just over a red card every 2 games. But if we link back to the previous slide, if I can do that, it's not great. Compared to, I will link it back to the Graham Poll one though, because I'm convinced he probably sent about 3 or 4 United and Arsenal players in a game. So that's obviously had the severe impact on his stats there. But if you look generally across, going back to the 2000-2001 season, you've got like 2 red cards in 22 games, 3 red cards in 23 games, and so on. So some of the red cards aren't too disproportionate there, where here you've got some which are quite lenient. Howard Webb being a lenient one, Andre Mariner, Chris Ford, not too bad. Surprisingly, Mike Dean, who is seen as the centre of attention, only handing out 2 red cards in 30 games. However, he will get his revenge later on in this presentation, which will put him to the top of a certain list as per. So yes, now we're starting to see, especially when we compare it back to 92-93, where there was hardly any cards given. Yes, I know there's more games being played now, but you can start to see that referees are getting a lot more tougher on the game. So if we look at the next season, which is 2015-2016, this is where Magic Mike Dean starts to come back into his prime. 33 games, 9 red cards, 107 yellows. So out of that, if that's about 134 points he'd have cost managers that season, which is tough. It's not easy. Surprisingly, Martin Atkinson, who had favoured less favourably in terms of the red cards in the previous slide in 2010, has actually shown more leniency now, so only handing out the 1 red card. So I like to think that he reevaluated what he'd done over the last 5 years and amended his refereeing standards to one which is more acceptable and more suitable in the game. And you've got Mark Clattenburg, who I think was seen by referees at the time when he was around as being one of the best referees. I think he handled a Champions League final, FA Cup final, but ultimately he got fed up and took the money elsewhere and went abroad to, I think it was somewhere in the Arab states to do refereeing over there. We got paid a hell of a lot more money, and probably a hell of a lot less stress as well. So, but he was probably the last recognised decent ref that we had. The rest going forward are just pitiful, if I'm honest. The names on this list, Mike Dean is awful. We've seen him. If you go on YouTube and type in Mike Dean, he's celebrating opposition's goals. He will do anything. He will do anything to stand out in the crowd. So if you're going to go watch Man United against Manchester City and Mike Dean is refereeing, you might as well ignore the 2 teams. It's the Mike Dean show. and just moving on here and just emphasising the Mike Dean show here. So we're moving on to the final slide. This is this season's performance. So this is showing how many games refs have currently managed this season and the amount of points that they've cost people. So one which jumps out for me is actually not Mike Dean. We'll come to him in a second. But you've got Paul Tierney, who's only took charge of 18 games this year, but he's handed out 69 yellow cards, which is 8 more than his nearest counterpart, Mike Oliver, who's managed 3 more games. He's also handed out 3 red cards, which is the
second highest total with the managers that have played, managers that refereed here. Sorry. So if you're looking to see a good game of football, you want Andre Marino in charge.
Yeah.
Hands out the least amount of yellow cards, hasn't handed out any red cards. He lets the game flow. So for me, that is what I like to see from a referee. He doesn't ruin the game by making any decisions which he shouldn't do. And also his card count is minimal. So he hands out under 3 yellow cards a game. So fair play to him. Someone who isn't playing fairly is Mike Dean. So he has the same amount of matches refereed this year as Andre Mariner. He has handed out 13 more yellow cards, so he's handing out over 3 a game. He has also handed out 7 red cards, which is more than double any other manager this season. So I know this is the year of VAR. I know last year was as well, but this year especially, they've tried to rejig it and make it better. A lot of managers now, what I'm seeing is they go into the monitor, but not necessarily being swayed by the call to go over to it. Sometimes they're sticking with their original decisions, and I think, you know what, fair play. If you're happy with your decision, you've seen it, and you stick with it, fair enough.
Yeah.
Problem is, you've got some managers who get swayed easily. So linking back just to Mike Dean, you can see his performance there is it's high in the card count. So just in terms of how many points it have cost managers this year, so that would be 82. That was too quick. 7.21. Yeah, he'd have cost 82 points this year to different managers off 18 games. As a result of the 7 red cards, he's probably created around about 21 suspensions. So 21 games will have missed as a result of his red cards. And it's difficult to equate the amount of yellow cards of how many suspensions would have been responsible or partly responsible for. But that just gives you an idea of just be careful who's refereeing your games, because you're playing a huge risk if you're going up against Mike Dean.
Wow.
And just finally, this is a comparison to football previously. So back in 1992-93, when football was seen in its purest form, you just come out of the old First Division, the Premier League had just been founded, and this is when you could get away with a lot more than you do now. So I'd be interested to see what the red cards Philip Don and Martin Bordenham were like, what they issued. I imagine it was for an absolute disgraceful challenge, or an elbow, or fist being flung, where now some red cards are a joke. I think the first game of the season, which Villa played Sheffield United, their centre-half got sent off, and it wasn't a red card. Similarly, when we played them, Phil Jagielka got sent off only a couple of game weeks ago. In my opinion, it wasn't a red card. And he went to the monitor, looked at it, and still gave it as a red card, which I can't get my head around. So
yeah.
So if we compare this quickly, we've got Keith Hackett. We'll look at the two who, I guess, refereeing the most games. Or actually, I'll tell you what, let's just have a look at the comparisons. So I know I'm Mike Dean bashing here, but we're going to go with it. So Mike Dean and Andre Manor both, and Paul Tierney, to be fair, have played 18 games or refereed 18 games. So is Martin Borden and Roger Milford and Joe Worrell. If we look at Mike Dean and Martin to compare, both refereed 18 games. Martin, 21 yellow cards to Mike Dean, 61. So that shows that the referees are cracking down on everything. And also more than double the amount of red cards that Martin issued. So again, that shows that Mike is particularly tough on the players in the current league. If we compare Roger Milford and Andre Mariner, both refereed 18 games, but unfortunately Andre Mariner, who is the most lenient ref this season, has still issued more than double the amount of cards that Roger has. So Roger issuing 22 yellows, Andre with 48. And then just finally, Paul Tierney, the yellow card king, who's refereed 18 games, as is Joe Worrell. And the stats are incomparable. 12 yellow cards for Joe Worrell in 18 games, so under a yellow card a game. Paul Tierney, very close to issuing 4 yellow cards a game. So also with 3 red cards to his name, which we'll be delighted to see. So this was just an overview, really, of just the refereeing standards from 1992-93 to the current league day.
Yeah.
And really just, I know I recommended that managers have a look at goalkeepers in previous podcasts, but do factor in who is refereeing the games going forward. Because if you've got a tough tackling midfielder or someone who likes to play on the edge, beware, because managers or the referees will have their eyes on them this season. So I know we're coming towards the end of it, but especially VAR's not going to go away. So for next year, just keep in mind if you've got a player who is a bit of a hothead, or even someone who's so much a team player they will take one for the team, just bear that in mind, that it will potentially have a detrimental effect on your season. So that is the presentation from me. That is.
Cool. I do have one question for you. And this would probably come from someone that, hasn't watched a lot of football over all these years that you've discussed there. But do you think, like, the trend is basically that a lot more yellow cards get handed out, every season almost.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't seem to actually impact the way the players go about playing and making challenges. It doesn't seem to put them off making dangerous challenges.
I think what would be interesting to see would be a video compilation of what tackles were like in the early 90s. And we won't go as far back as the 80s because there were some horrendous tackles in there. There was some full fist flying. I link back to players like Vinnie Jones, who purposely went out to actually hurt people. I don't think in the modern game you don't see many rumbles anymore. I think the last game that I can remember, which I really enjoyed, where tackles were flying in, where it did get nasty and was great entertainment, was probably the year when Leicester won the league. It was Chelsea-Tottenham, and Chelsea won 2-0 or 2-1, I think it was, and basically ruined Tottenham's title chances, their local rivals. But the tackles were flying left, right and centre. There was eye gouging.
Oh my God. Is that not a red, though?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if it got picked up in the game, but it certainly got picked up after the game and was banned for about 3-4 games. I can't remember who it was, but I'm sure someone got done for eye gouging. Tackles were flying in. But that was a really great game to watch from a neutral and a fan's perspective. It got me out of the seat, screaming at the telly, because I don't even like either of the two teams. It was brilliant to watch.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I can't think of a game where you have big tackles coming in regularly. So I think players have adapted as years have gone on, but I think it's a different generation now.
Yeah.
I think people's mentalities have changed as well. Because I think probably in the 90s it was like, oh, men have got to be, hard as nails, and the way to show that is by I'm going to fight you or kick you harder. Where I think now probably footballers are more generally intelligent as a whole, in the way that they're like more technical. They're better footballers, so they win games via that attribute rather than just bullying opponents, which is nice to see. You still have some sort of teams in South America, especially when you get to a World Cup. Like when England drew Colombia in the last World Cup, it was just the Colombians are doing all the dirty tactics to try to get England players sent off, winding them up. And so I think it still exists in those countries, especially when you play them, like saying World Cups or tournaments, because they'll go after you and try pick on us to wind them up. So fair enough. But yeah, I think it has certainly changed over the years, and it's probably changed for the better in the way the football qualities get better. However, it would still be nice to see some of those players coming off with a bandage around their heads because they've put their body in the way of a ball or a man. You do still have the odd player like that, but
it's not rugby, Will.
But I don't know who saw the Juventus Porto game in the week. It was the Champions League, whatever stage they're at the moment. And it was a free kick, which was like a long way out, and the Porto player kicked it. But you got the Juventus wall all jumped up, basically went into a shell, all of them. Ronaldo was, I don't even know what he was doing. He's my favourite player, one of my favourite players, but he just curled up to a ball and made himself so small when the idea is make yourself big. And the ball went under the wall and went in the net, and Juventus got knocked out. So, yeah, it's different. It's supposed when you get brought up on one scene of football, like hark back to Roy Keane and Vieira's battering each other, but they were great games to watch. But yeah, I think the game's definitely got better from an entertainment point of view in terms of the quality on show. So just different times, I think, and yeah, like I say, different changes throughout the year. The years have gone by.
Fair enough. Well, that was an interesting segment, something different for us, not something quite related to, the league, but still relevant, I think.
Yeah, thought I'd mix it up.
Yeah, no, really interesting. I'm sure the guys will find that interesting as well, and everyone will be like, right, when's Mike Dean refereeing one of my games?
Yeah, some people might look out for it already, but he's someone I keep an eye on, and I sometimes make a change just in my lineup, or just try grin and bear it and hope that hope he doesn't do anything stupid. So hopefully people enjoy that anyway.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks for listening, everybody. Make sure to subscribe and like the video. Leave a comment of what you'd like for us to just talk about next time. Thanks for coming on again, Will. Great segment.
Cheers for having me. All the best.
And good luck for the draw, which will be on Adam's podcast in a couple episodes' time.
Excellent.
may the odds be forever in your favour, as it were.
Yeah, get me that home draw, Adam. That's what I'm
Yeah.
looking for. I don't want to be going away, so a nice home draw would be lovely. Thank you.
And yeah, this is the DraftCast. And remember, draft is life. See you next time.